Now it's just you and me.
The Dan Yorke State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Taco Comfort Solutions.
Great to have you aboard. Thanks for tuning in on this Monday evening. I'm not sure what we're going to do with the program over the course of the next week or two. Hopefully that is the time period where we are actually going to be able to, I don't know, figure out how things are. But right now, tonight, it's just you and me and a bunch of information, and Stacy's done a great job and Kev's done a good job putting this show together, so I'm going to be just offering you some of the highlights of the day, news of the day, both on a local and a network basis, and just kind of hang out with you here, meaning there are no guests. Our building here at WPRI 12, Fox 64, and Myri TV and all those things that are us are under kind of a restriction, a quarantine. Nobody who doesn't work here is allowed in here right now, and this is not an unusual circumstance. You know, it's really interesting when you knock down norms and protocols, and the world just kind of changes, and you have to build new norms and protocols. It's a mind blower in a lot of ways. But it's also kind of refreshing. It gives you a chance to kind of do things differently. Some of the rules are broken by nature, so you do things the way you want. And I'm just kind of hanging out here with you, just commiserating at this point. Now, on a practical level, if we find that the resources that we can bring to this show are not enough for you over the course of the week, then we will bring you previous programs for a week or two. So that's your fair warning for those of you who are regular viewers of the show, and there are so many of you now, so I appreciate that very much. Just in terms of today, I am sure that you're also watching the newses and everything else, but in case you missed it, let me just reflect on a couple of things that were happening here. Now, we tape this show, you catch me looking at the clock often in the early afternoon, and there have been, by the time you see the show at 7:30 on Myri TV and Fox Providence at midnight, you have probably either peeked in or received news from two separate briefings by the governor. We are reflecting on this morning's, where she first announced that this was now new news for restaurants. Listen.
I'm announcing that effective tomorrow, Tuesday, March 17th, until Monday, March 30th, dine-in food and beverage services at all restaurants, bars, cafes, coffee shops in Rhode Island will be shut down. Drive-through and takeout and delivery services can remain open. I'm also announcing that we are restricting gatherings to no more than 25 people. That's a big change. It's a change from last week. This crisis is changing every day. So as of today, effective immediately, no more gatherings of 25 people or more.
Which makes perfect sense, right? And the CDC is at 50. So we're at 25, CDC's at 50, Massachusetts is in that number as well. What's interesting, I think, in terms of this social distancing thing is that the states are acting on their own, trying to create the lower curve in their own territories in a pretty responsible way. Now, there are some kooky governors out there, Trump sycophants and the like, who have, you know, found themselves between a rock and a hard place, because days ago they were saying, hey, go to the bars and have some fun and do all that kind of stuff, and days later they were announcing school closings because, well, this thing is starting to get a little out of hand in their own preparedness. And that dynamic is thankfully not the case here in the Northeast for the most part, where governors are working together. Charlie Baker and Gina Raimondo reportedly are on the phone at least once a day with each other, trying to figure this whole thing out. Mayors are also stepping up. Local community officials are making decisions on their own as far as enforcing the restaurant situation and other restrictions. Mayor Elorza was at that same press conference earlier today.
Effective immediately, I will be ordering my police department and our public safety officials to ensure that we ramp up monitoring according to the guidance and the directives given by the governor to make sure that there is compliance, that restaurants, bars remain shut, and that gatherings are maintained to less than 25 people. I am also requiring that Providence Place Mall close until further notice. We want to eliminate the highest risk areas within our state, and frankly, we also want everyone to take this seriously. This week, as kids are out of school, and perhaps some families are out of work, we do not want them to congregate in these public spaces and create the circumstances that are ripe for transmission. We need everyone to take this serious and do not leave your house unless it's for an essential reason.
Now, as far as the travel to bars and restaurants and this restriction, there was a part of me that thought this weekend, they're going to have to shut these places down because people are just not being very smart. And the St. Paddy's Day celebrations that happened in Newport this weekend were kind of a split-screen mind-blower, don't you think? I mean, what were people thinking about? I was watching some of the coverage and reading some of the coverage where the restaurants and the bars were following protocols and people were getting wipes, like, you know, I just wiped down the table. People were getting wipes before they went in, and I don't know how much fun that is, by the way. I guess everyone's different, and maybe I'm getting too old, and the bar scene is something I still enjoy, but not mandatory in my life. But social distancing, cutting down the occupational, I should say, occupancy levels of the restaurants, like made sense, and I think most of the restaurateurs and pub owners were doing the best they could. But I just couldn't think of what was in the minds of people who were on lines at bars in Southie and in Newport and other places. I know that there is this mindset split between being careful and keeping the economy going. I don't know if the revelers have that motive or not, but seemingly the government officials here have figured out that for the most part there is a segment of the population that doesn't get the concept of social distancing, has seen this thing somewhat as a condition, meaning a disease, that may only affect them temporarily, meaning they'll get a bug and get over it, not really thinking about the transmissible issues, that just because you might be afforded a break based on your age, demographic, and health condition, that you could seriously impact somebody else's health simply by being a carrier, and most likely completely unwitting to that. That really hasn't caught on is, I don't know. The human condition is something that we talk about all the time, both here and on the radio and in our lives, and some things are just mysteries. I wish I had a really profound thing to say about it. In the meantime, this behavioral issue is really going to be the key, it seems. And yet circumstances like this in Cranston West High School, where last week there was a reported preliminary case, right? I believe it was preliminary. And the school was, ordered home, and the student body and the teaching population there was asked to self-quarantine at home. Well, clearly that message was not getting out. And to his credit, Mayor Alan Fung decided that he had to go to social media to try to reinforce the concept.
Hey guys, it's Mayor Fung. Over the past 24 hours, I've been hearing that not everyone at Cranston West is taking the Department of Health quarantine seriously, and that needs to stop now. This is your first global pandemic to hit Cranston? Well, guess what? It's mine too. So I know it can seem unreal that this is happening, but it is. This crazy new virus appears to be very contagious, and if you have it, it can hop off of you and onto your grandparents or friends with weakened immune system, and they could be in a lot of health trouble. And it's my job to stop that as much as humanly possible. That's why I need you to go home and stay home for the remainder 13 days.
And I thought that was a wholly responsible message. That's good mayoring. That's good leadership. That's stepping out and calling people out for what they're obviously not doing. Young people are going to, you have to put yourself back in the place of what it's like to be 15, 16, 17 years old. If this was the mid-'70s and we were at a high school for a week or two and there was some message out there that we had to kind of, you know, keep a simmer on it and stay at home, I'd be laughing, you know. But, you know, if there was some kind of discipline that was going to be offered by my parents about that, and maybe the car was going to be taken away. Do people do that anymore? You take the car away from the kids? Or whatever penalty you know, as the kids get older, your tools in the toolbox become lesser and lesser, right? But more significant. So you don't nag them all the time, but sometimes the car keys seem to be the thing that, then again, all the kids have their own cars these days, right? I don't know. I think those are the kinds of things that you're going to have to do as parents to make sure that the kids stay home. I have lamented the idea that we are fixed to the video screens and that it's poisoning our kids' brains. Well, give them the poison. Make sure that they're having a ball with their Xboxes or whatever the heck they play and all their games, and maybe that'll keep them busy for now. They've got social media. They're already plugged into this thing anyway. They can group chat and whatever else they have got to do, but that's the kind of stuff that is really mandatory right now. So, you know, go the extra mile, and I don't think you're alone. This is the thing that the whole thing brings, this notion of, am I alone? Commiserate with other parents. Talk to them. You can still, the phone still work. You can still see them in the streets. That's the great thing. I mean, you can go outside on a beautiful day like today. You can go out and say hello to your neighbors and talk about what's going on. Just keep 6 feet from them. But, you know, you can chat these things over if you start to feel alone. Like, I can't parent this kid. This kid is saying that everybody else is doing what they're doing, da 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 da. I think the parenting role here is going to be really important for all the kids, especially now that the schools are closed. Now, there's a difference. Cranston West had a quarantine because they had a case. The rest of the kids are just kind of freelancing out there. Still, putting a lid on that parentally is the thing to do. When we come back, we will review some of the things that some of the experts have said to us over the last couple of weeks. And of course, there was some presidential politics re the coronavirus and the latest on how the nation is responding. All still to come. Stay with us.
Effective immediately, I will be ordering my police department and our public safety officials to ensure that we ramp up monitoring according to the guidance and the directives given by the governor to make sure that there is compliance, that restaurants, bars remain shut, and that gatherings are maintained to less than 25 people.
To be honest with you, you know, it's kind of a mind bender as well, the less than 25 people gathering thing, because I think there are a lot of us that are walking around just trying to stay away from everybody. And then there are, you know, work groups. And we have 3 people in this room right now who put this program together. I'm pretty comfortable being with them right now. 25 actually seems to be a pretty healthy group. So if you've got some kind of a conference call, by the way, this doesn't necessarily pertain to businesses or schools that are yet to, or school gatherings, say faculty gatherings, that kind of thing, where people got together in a meeting room. But give yourself some spread on that. I just think that the 25 number is doable. It's certainly not going to help the businesses. And the state of Rhode Island and the federal government are going to have to come up with some wacky formula to find some way to infuse cash into this economy when the rubber meets the road. And I would think the rubber meets the road probably in 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. Obviously, the market is in the dumper. And it's almost as if, you know, just you can't even look. And whether we have more technical shutdowns in the market due to precipitous drops or whether this thing just glides down and stops, I still think that we're going to see a return to the market when we have a decline in cases, where people are starting to get back to normal. But I'm not a financial expert, and frankly, even if you find a financial expert, it's hard to actually trust what they're saying. I think there's a lot of human good faith that has to go on here. Just some rambling thoughts. By the way, I'm going to switch you up here, Kevin. Do we have the headline on the masses and dioceses? The diocese has, once again, thank you, has decided to let you off the hook for Mass. Not that that's the way Catholics ought to be approaching it, of course, but the bishop says, in light of the growing coronavirus crisis in Rhode Island and in response to the request of public officials, and upon the recommendation of health experts, I hereby direct that all celebration of all public masses and other liturgical services be suspended effective tomorrow, Tuesday, March 17th, and continuing until further notice. Interesting, the celebration of funerals and weddings can continue, but must be celebrated without Mass using approved liturgical forms, meaning there's no communion. So there's no communion distribution, and that's its own wild paradox, don't you think? So just know that most things that you normally would think might be affected probably are. Doctor's appointments, be aware of that. I've had two, this is my season for routines. I could list all my doctors, but you don't need to know that. There are HIPAA laws here to protect. But most of them are routine, and they've been postponed by the doctors because they're trying to clear out the traffic that they have there. So most things that you thought eventually would come to some kind of closure are. For instance, my own daughter, who is in graduate school, who struggled because she has a hospital placement in her clinical and has just 4 weeks to go before she graduates, felt very badly about pulling out of the clinical in this particular hospital, only to find out that after some discussion and back and forth with their supervisors, that eventually the dam broke, boom, and they said, we're pulling all the grad students out of the clinicals. The entire school has done so. There's this thing that goes on where people are hesitating, wondering, guessing, negotiating, trying to rework things, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, let's just stop. And that's what's going to be the case. If it hasn't already happened to you, know that it probably will. The social distancing part of this whole thing is the key, and keeping the hospitalization cases, which are what? Anywhere from 20 to 2% of the cases at a lower level and a flattening. And our biologist from PC, Laura Williams, explained to us last week how important that is.
Why you'll see people talking about flattening the epidemic curve. So this is an idea where you're looking at how can we get the number of cases below a point that our healthcare system can deal with it. And so that's why you see people asking for folks who may not really be part of the vulnerable population to make decisions about things like social distancing, make decisions about travel, because we're trying to make sure that we do not overwhelm the healthcare system, because everybody's health, you know, heart attacks aren't going to go away.
Right.
You still need to be able to treat those things. There's been indications that people who smoke might be more vulnerable. So lots of different things come into this: age, smoking, underlying conditions. Geography might play a part of it, but there's so much travel now between places that I think that if you've got community spread in a few places, you really do need to clamp that down, or it will get out into the rest of the nation. One of the things I always tell my microbiology students is that there's a lot of debate about whether viruses are living or not, and they're really just a very simple organism. And we're the ones with all the complexity that comes down to, is it going to spread? How far is it going to spread? How can we treat people who get it? And all of that is all factors that we have control over.
Here. Bottom line, don't not take it seriously.
Yes, absolutely.
Don't not take it seriously.
Yes.
But don't freak out.
Don't panic, but think carefully about what your role can be.
Of course, the panic can settle in the more that the restrictions come in. The psychological impact of the restrictions doesn't change the behavior of the microorganism. And so as long as we are behaving properly around and avoiding the microorganism has its own problem to deal with, right? When we come back, we'll check on the national politics of this. There was a presidential debate last night, heavily engaged in coronavirus strategies. Stay with us. So clearly the coronavirus dominated a lot of the consciousness of America and through the Democratic presidential debate last night, which was a dandy, actually. If you could just shake the anxiety of everything else and listen in on policy and the way they would handle this particular crisis, it was pretty good. Having the candidates down to 2, no bother of studio audience, and a pretty casual format, I think provided a pretty good working session.
The leading Democratic presidential candidates facing off for their first one-on-one debate. And due to concerns over the coronavirus, former Vice President Joe Biden and Senator Bernie Sanders standing at podiums 6 feet apart without a live audience. Right off the bat, the two making their case for how they would handle the pandemic. Both candidates agree working with other countries is key to managing this global crisis.
If there was ever a moment when the entire world is in this together, got to support each other, this is that moment.
We need someone who knows how to bring the world together.
Sanders pointing to Medicare for all as part of his proposed solution, saying people should not have to worry about paying for virus testing.
We need unprecedented action right now to deal with the unprecedented crisis.
Biden, however, saying the country needs a different course of action.
People are looking for results, not a revolution.
And for the first time, Biden promising to name a woman as his running mate, with Sanders saying he'll likely do the same. Biden also pledging to appoint the first black woman to the Supreme Court.
It's long overdue.
Next up, Ohio, Arizona, Florida, and Illinois will all hold their primary elections on Tuesday. Those states all expressing confidence that voters can safely cast their ballots amid the coronavirus. This as 2 states announced postponements of their primaries.
You know, from just a political competitive point of view, I thought Bernie Sanders was a little bit more strident in this debate than I expected him to be, only because I thought what he did earlier in the week was very sportsmanlike. To give Joe Biden a list of about 7 or 8 questions that really dominate the Sanders progressive social democratic socialistic ideology, meaning he wanted Joe Biden to be answering to these questions because Bernie more or less sees that the delegate count is on the wall. But I think Bernie could probably go away from last night thinking that he gave it the old college try, wanted to show that he has whatever stuff he thinks is the right stuff in case Joe Biden, you know, fails down the line. And when the debate was over, he more or less walked out of there, I think, fait accompli, that Joe Biden was going to be the nominee, but having made his points, no doubt. In terms of presidential leadership, I'll try to quell a lot of commentary on that. I am sure that you've seen some updates that were scheduled for this afternoon from the president, that those airports were full of people coming from overseas, jamming up Chicago and other places, was an outrage of preparedness from the federal government that didn't know that these people would all, be flying in at the same time? Well, you offered the deadline for them to get out, didn't you? Just bad stuff. But you know, hopefully a learning curve and hopefully not too much COVID-19 in those terminals. A final word when we come back. Hey, you know, I got the wipes for the table. I asked the staff, when's the last time somebody wiped this table down? We're like, oh, I don't know. Well, guess what? I know. Every day when I come in, I'm not so, you know, it's like, who ate my porridge? I'm not so sure who sits at this table when I'm not taping this show, but I'm not taking any chances. And I think that's part of the key. So the hand washing thing is 20 seconds minimal. You know, be careful of knobs. Do the right thing. If you're out there shopping, you know, be aware, wipe down your shopping carts, you know, be aware that people use the door handles to the freezer section a lot. Whatever comes to mind that you think you probably want to do to protect yourself, you probably should. And don't feel bad about it. You're not crazy. We'll see how it goes one day after the next here and on the radio on WPRO. Thanks for tuning in. Good luck. We'll be okay.